Good morning, everybody. This is Sandy Fisher with Inovonics. Happy you're here with us today. I've been with the company for 25 years. I started in tech support, then moved into security sales, and I handle distributors, dealers, national accounts, and even a little bit of OEM. Today, we are doing Inovonics online training specifically for Johnson Controls. So let's go ahead and begin. And I know a number of you are familiar with Inovonics. Hopefully there's some new people here as well. Let me just give you a quick overview. Inovonics is a life safety grade wireless specifically for the security industry. We use the 900 megahertz ISM band of 902 to 928, and I'll explain a little bit more about that, as well as what frequency hopping spread spectrum means. But we do get long range not only because of our frequency and the associated wavelength, but also we're sending very small amounts of data, very minimal bandwidth. We're talking 50 bytes of data. And when you are sending such a small amount of data, that enables the receiver to have increased sensitivity. In other words, it can hear a weaker signal or a signal with lower margin. For example, let's say we're on opposite sides of a room and I just have to tell you a few words. I can whisper them and you'll hear me because there's very little information. But if I have to read you a whole page, I'm either going to have to speak up or we'll have to move closer together because there's more information. And if you can't hear me as well, you'll miss some of those words. So that's what we mean by receive sensitivity. Our wireless propagates or gets through walls and goes long distance. It also fills a room. We call that saturation. And it does both of those at a low current draw so that our transmitters get long battery life. This has nothing to do with Wi-Fi. It's built for purposes, we call it, so you don't need IT management. And so it's very easy to deploy. We'll talk about that as well. In addition to the transmitters, the way we cover large job sites is with our wireless repeaters. Backup battery is built in, so you just have to plug it into a wall. We'll talk about that as well. I'll show you our full selection of endpoint transmitters, our receivers that integrate with any platform. Many of the platforms you use, we have specific interfaces. In general, our reputation in the industry is that we are proven as the best wireless for life safety in physical security applications. So let's do our poll questions first. There's going to be two of them. And if you click on the poll tab, you'll be able to see them. The first one is, what is your level of experience with Inovonics? Little to none, some, or a lot? And I'm also curious, what side of the house at Johnson Controls are you on? Core commercial, national accounts, commercial fire, if anyone's on the Simplex Grinnell legacy side, or building management system. So let me give you about 30 seconds or so to answer those questions, and then we'll ask Nikki, our Marcom manager and our producer for today, to chime in and say and tell us what kind of response we have.
All right, we are getting some responses here, Sandy. They're still coming in. Okay. For what is your level of experience with Inovonics? It looks like, for the most part, it's a lot. It looks like 17% said little to none, 33% said some, and then 50% said a lot.
All right.
And then your other poll question, what category represents your main focus? It's 100% physical security core commercial.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I can check back later too at the end of your presentation, see if anybody else had chimed in, but that's what I'm getting right now. Okay,
sounds good. I'll still cover a little bit of everything, but I'll do some parts a little bit quicker. So we will focus on the core and well, I should say the interfaces that the security folks use.
I think that's let's go over also, Sandy. It looks like you are getting a few now for building management systems. Just FYI.
Oh, good.
Yeah. All right.
Good. Terrific. And that's something new from Inovonics. So I will tell you about that. And there might be a little bit of overlap on the physical security side. I've spoken with some branches where they've said we might be getting into some of the building management stuff. So we will touch on that as well. So here, take a look at these pictures I've thrown in to illustrate how much is involved with trenching and running wire using a lift, as well as the conduit and the wire inside that conduit. So let's just talk about things in general terms as far as what wireless is accomplishing for Johnson Controls. In the security industry, when it comes to what we are helping our end user customers accomplish, it's risk mitigation. Remember, threat is the bad thing that can happen. Risk is the outcome of that threat having occurred. And there's different ways of managing risk. For the most part, we are doing risk mitigation, meaning reducing the outcome of a threat having occurred. And what we offer is cost-effective risk mitigation, especially when risk is high or even extreme. And in these situations, healthcare, education, financial, commercial, industrial, these things that I've listed, that's where we've got the biggest opportunity to mitigate risk for our clients. Think about panic buttons at a behavioral health facility. If the caregivers there have nothing, and their training is, well, if you get into trouble, just start yelling and screaming or call someone. That doesn't cost much, but it's not very effective. The other extreme would be hire a bodyguard for everybody. Extremely effective, but cost prohibitive. So deploying panic buttons in concert with policies and procedures is what I'm talking about when I say cost-effective risk mitigation. In addition to alarms or intrusion detection, we also work very well with video and access control systems. So I'm going to expand on both of those first. For video, we'll talk a little bit about how using an external motion sensor can make motion-triggered video much more meaningful, as well as reducing operator fatigue, which is a very important resource for video management applications. And so I'll come back to that in a moment. For access control, we have uncontrolled openings. I'll tell you about that. We see a lot of door release by receptionists, initiated by our pendants, as well as using a panic alarm to initiate lockdown. So let's dive into that a little bit. Imagine a side door or a back door. That's an uncontrolled opening. So in access control, the controlled openings, there's a lot going on there. You've got a reader, a strike, power, exit hardware, door position switch. So those are typically wired. I realize there are some wireless lock sets, but for the most part, controlled openings are wired. But the side doors and back doors might go ignored during installation. So you put this door contact with our transmitter, and then here's the installation right here. You can take our 4-channel EN4204R relay output receiver. You put that in the closet where all the door controllers are, and the door controllers are going to have spare inputs. So you can use one of those inputs to connect our relay output into. So when that side door or back door is open, that input can be defined appropriately so that you can log and monitor what's going on at those uncontrolled openings, as well as providing an alert of a propped door. When it comes to door release, I would also use an input on one of the door controllers. Never go into the strike itself if you can avoid that, because we don't want that to log as a forced entry. When it comes to initiating lockdown, think about a school, and administrators can have panic alarms, and they can activate that if there's a situation such as a violent attack, a civil disturbance, or even the proximity of a dangerous animal. We used to get those alerts here all the time in Boulder, where I live, when they say school's gone into lockdown, or lockout in that case, because there's been a bear in the neighborhood. So think about those applications. And by the way, on the topic of schools, and we'll get into this more in a little bit, this is a great time to get all your school projects done. School's going to be coming back in the fall. So this is a great opportunity to get in, get the job done, and get out as quickly as possible. Because we know that all job sites nowadays, there's going to be limited access to getting in to conduct an installation. So using wireless will help you accomplish that quickly, and also hopefully so you can get in, get out, move on to the next job, and clear your backlog and get as many jobs done as you can. On the video side of things, so most cameras do have onboard VMD, video motion detection. Now, I was at a local ASIS meeting, and they were talking, it was a pharmaceutical company, and they were talking about how they review their motion video every day. And I asked, how does that work? And the response was, we get a lot of useless footage because of two things that can happen. At night, when a camera's automatic gain control comes on, that introduces noise into the picture, and the resulting pixel changes can result in that being misinterpreted as motion. Also, if you're looking at a scene at a distance or outside, moving foliage can also be misinterpreted as motion. And so what you can do is, in those challenging scenes, use a motion sensor, whether it's an indoor motion or an outdoor motion. I'll show you the Optex iSeries motions for those applications as well. And then that can go, those wireless motions can report to one of our add-on receivers with the relay output going directly into the camera's alarm input. Or in a couple cases of Milestone and Genetec, for example, we have a direct interface. So what that will result in is, when that motion triggered video happens, if the system is being monitored live, then the operator will know it's a true event, and that will reduce distractions on the part of the operator and reduce operator fatigue. If video is being reviewed the next day and the operator is taking time to look at all the motion triggered video events that happened all throughout the night, that takes a lot of time. So this technique I'm talking about really helps preserve a resource, which is the operator mindset while they're looking at all that video, which in video applications is very important. One more point I'd like to bring up is, consider when your jobs have an opportunity to establish intrusion at a perimeter, if you can use an appropriate detector, you're detecting an intrusion sooner, and so that you're giving the response more time to interrupt the adversary as they're on their path toward whatever their target happens to be. Also, think about a trade-off between where the detector goes and what the potential for nuisance alarms are. So looking at the picture on the left, if there's a fence or a gate, you can get the detector on the outside, and that might detect a little bit sooner, but then there could be nuisance alarms from animals, for example. If you get the detector on the inside, maybe there's fewer animals in there, so there's fewer sources of nuisance alarms. You might not be detecting as soon, but keep in mind, a couple of guys could hop that fence fairly quickly. The picture on the right, that's called an isolation zone, and even with all that razor wire and those fences, a couple guys could defeat that with a ladder and a couple mattresses. But whenever you can detect intrusion inside an isolation zone, that's an ideal scenario. All right, a little bit more about our technology. Frequency hopping spread spectrum. This is how we avoid radio interference. So if there's interference on certain channels, the radio messages on the other channels are going to get through. So when a transmitter sends a message, frequency hopping means it sends a message on one channel, hops over to another channel, and sends that same message again. It does that about 20 times on an alarm event, each one redundantly. As long as one gets through, then you're good. In reality, multiple messages are going to get through, and that's nothing to worry about. We handle that automatically. One example of this is our panic buttons are used by the security people at every major US airport. So the next time you fly, which may be a while, when you run your bag through the x-ray, when you're going through security, you'll see that the operator there who's looking at the x-ray of your bags, there's one of our pendants mounted. And an airport is a perfect example of an environment where there's a lot of radio frequency interference, and we work in those environments perfectly. When it comes to the frequency, we stick with 900 megahertz. 900, the higher the frequency, the shorter the wavelength. So they have an inverse relationship. So think about residential wireless, which is 300 megahertz. And in a residential environment, there's wood, drywall, things like that. But in commercial, there's a lot of metal. There's metal studs, there's piping, conduit, ducting. So the picture on the right shows that grid of metal lines that you would see if you were to remove the concrete and the drywall. And it's that shorter wavelength of 900 that is propagating in between all those spaces that are made out of metal. So a great way to think about that is think of 900 as a baseball, 300 megahertz for residential as a basketball, and the smaller object is going to pass in between the metal studs, whereas the larger or the longer wavelengths would bounce off of a metal stud. So that's just a good analogy for how 900 megahertz is behaving in a commercial environment. All right. Something unique to Inovonics is our ability to go transmitter to repeater to repeater to repeater to repeater at 900 megahertz. This is how we scale for let's say there's a small retail establishment which might not even need a repeater, up to a high-rise hospital that could take maybe 20 or 30 repeaters. And so this is how we cover these large premises. As long as you're not trying to go across town, that's the key. But we can cover any large premise, and you're never stuck. You can always put in a repeater wherever you need it. We'll talk about the site survey kit as far as how you make those determinations later on. But the repeaters are wireless. They just plug into line power. There's no other wiring between them or back to the head end receiver. And this is our, what we call a commercial mesh. And you can get up to 10 repeater hops. So that's how we cover these large job sites. Backup battery will give you about a day's worth of operation. Then it will recharge when power is restored. And it comes with the power transformer. And these do have a commercial Berg UL listing, and I believe they're CUL as well for you folks up in Canada. So now let's start talking about the head end or receiver interfaces. So first we go into the Honeywell Vista platform, ideally the Vista 128 and Vista 250. This part number is the EN7290. I'm going to start getting into some part numbers now. Don't worry about memorizing them. We can get you our product guide, which lays everything out, as well as we can get you this slide deck as well. Now, this Honeywell Vista interface is going to give you what we call point-to-point for alarms and trouble conditions. So you'll know all the way through the central station if, for example, transmitter 18 is an alarm or number 27 has a low battery. For those of you who have used Inovonics for quite some time, before we had this, we used our add-on receivers with relays, and that required expander modules and power supplies. The EN7290 eliminates that, so that saves a lot of time and money. Now, there is a what I'm calling a simple pre-registration process where you log the transmitters into the receiver, and that way that receiver interface will pass only the messages from transmitters in that system to the panel. From there, it sets up just like Honeywell Wireless. So if your installers know how to program Honeywell Wireless, they already know how to do this because we emulate that existing construct of the Vista panels and that ECP bus. So that means little to no training is required for the installers. There are a number of UL commercial Berg listings as well. Also, I know the Vista interface has been around for a very long time. Honeywell is working on, I think it's called Pro Series, and this should work on that. So we have talked to Honeywell. I believe we are going to be interfaced into the upcoming Honeywell Berg platform. For you folks in national accounts, and for all of you for that matter, we go into Bosch. So again, same point to point. We go into Bosch B series and G series. Now the receiver interface is a Bosch part. It's an EN-Kit-SDI2 for the GV4 platform, as well as the 9512. For older panels, or if you need more than 8 repeaters, because there is an 8 repeater limit on the SDI2 interface, then you would get the Zonex interface, and that's an EN-Kit-01. If you're working with a 9512 panel, you will need a Zonex adapter, but that's how you can handle a very large system with hundreds of transmitters. Now, for the building management people, or for anyone who might be getting into that space, we have a BACnet gateway. Now, BACnet is an interoperability standard in the business management, which includes building management, which includes building automation and commercial HVAC. And we are seeing more instances of physical security converging with building automation. So we have this IP gateway. It plugs into an IP port. It can take PoE, so that can go right into a PoE port in an IT closet, and it will play into any building management platform that can handle BACnet, which includes Johnson Controls Metasys and the smaller sister version called Verisys. So imagine let's say your customer is a hotel, and there's a Metasys platform involved for the building management system. You can take this gateway, this EN4080 with BACnet output, put that on that network, and then program panic buttons into it. And those panic button alarms can be initiated by housekeeping staff. That is an initiative in many municipalities for hotels. That can be a very expensive project, but if you can leverage an existing installed platform, that's a great way to accomplish that application cost effectively. So our transmitters, doors, motions, panics would show up as what's called binary inputs. Then we have some environmental devices for temperature and humidity that would present as analog inputs. And then you can do anything with those values that you can do in that building management platform of yours called Metasys. For anything else that we don't have a specific interface for, we have these add-on receivers. Many of you are familiar with them. I like to call them small, medium, and large. The EN4204R is a 4-channel. It has a 5th fault relay for your trouble signals. The EN4216MR will handle 16 transmitters. You would zone them out among as many as 5 alarm relay outputs. Then you would have that 6th relay going into a zone on the alarm panel, for example, that you would designate for RF trouble. And if that zone trips, you just go look at the display on the receiver, and that will identify what the fault is. Then the big one, the EN4232MR, will give you 12 relay outputs, 11 for alarm, 1 for fault, and it'll handle up to 32 endpoints. So if you want full point-to-point, that'll give you 11, and then you can supervise your repeaters on those higher point numbers if you like. So you'll know if a repeater, for example, has an AC power loss and is switched over to backup battery, or a case tamper, for example. Backing up just one sec, this BACnet also works with Genetec. I know some of the JCI branches use Genetec Security Center. Our weekly cup next week is specifically on our new interface via BACnet into the Genetec Security Center platform, which includes access control and VMS. Okay, let's talk about transmitters. For doors and universal transmitters, here they are. The EN1210 would be used with an external door contact of your choice. So you can use a regular recess contact for a man door. or if there's an external door, some kind of a surface contact. This can be used for overhead doors, again, with the appropriate kind of contact, normally open or normally closed. The EN1210 EOL requires the use of an end-of-line resistor between the contact and the transmitter. I would use that if you're working with a normally open loop, or if you're working off of a spec that calls out for an EOL. The EN1210W has the contact built in, magnets included. There's a reed switch on board, so you line them up on the door and the door frame, put the transmitter on the door frame, magnet on the door. Just one word of caution, if you're working with a metal door or an exterior door, I would recommend going with the EN1210 with an appropriate contact. If you have an application that requires UL commercial Berg, that's what the EN1215s are for, because they require an end-of-line resistor and they have a wall tamper. So those are a couple UL commercial Berg requirements. A couple of more universals, the EN1212 will take two contacts, and that will be recognized as two zones if the receiver or interface supports it. So the Honeywell one does, because each zone can have can you use up to 4 different loop designations, so loop 1 and loop 2. The add-on receivers with the MR and the part number also support that. The EN1252 also happens to be a dual zone, but that's our high power, longer range. I would use that if you have maybe 1 or 2 endpoints that are beyond our normal range of realistically a few hundred feet. You know, in building and through building, I'd say our range is 200 plus feet. If you're going outdoors, or maybe there's a motion at a perimeter, you can expect maybe up to several hundred feet, but you would use the high power if you can't get a repeater in between because there's no line power perhaps, or maybe, again, if you just need longer range for 1 or 2 endpoints, say in a distant outbuilding. So those are the rest of the universals. For indoor motions, we bring in these sensors as an OEM, and then we build our transmitter into them. The EN1260 is our, I would say, our standard wall unit for a 50 by 50, 90 degree volumetric space. You can swap that Fresnel lens with the ACC672LR. That'll make it into a 100-foot curtain. The EN1262 is a Bosch motion with our transmitter built in. That's a PET unit. The EN1265 is our 360 ceiling mount. That will give you a 60-foot diameter at a 12-foot ceiling height. Then you could swap the lens. I believe it's an ACC669, and that will double the ceiling height with the same diameter of 60 feet on the floor. In either case, if your ceiling is shorter, that diameter would be reduced. Check with your estimator to help you with those geometric calculations. The EN1261HT, this is our PIR with the transmitter on one board. 40 by 40, great for high traffic. It's got a bigger battery. It has a couple different sleep modes. All wireless PIRs have a sleep mode, by the way. That's how they get long battery life. This is also a quad element, meaning for it to trip, it has to see motion movement left, right, and up, down. That's how we accomplish nuisance alarm discrimination. And with that, as well as the back tamper, that makes it a UL listed item. I believe our ceiling mount is UL listed as well. So far, so good. Nikki, can you still hear me? Anybody there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you just fine. I think everybody else can as well. So you're doing great.
Okay, let's move on to panic buttons. I'm getting a bit of an echo. Okay, we're good. Panic buttons. Okay, so if a panic button part number ends in a D, that means it's a double button press. You got to hit both buttons at the same time. If it ends in an S, that's a single button press. If there's an F on the end, that stands for fixed mount, which means it's got a tamper spring. So the EN1223s, they are water resistant. They both come with a neck chain and belt clip accessory pack. The single button in this case is best suited for nurse call. So I would go with a double button press for staff initiated panic or duress alarm whenever you can. The EN1233D and EN1233S, those are neck chain. The EN1235s have a very sturdy belt clip. And the EN1235 SF and DF, like I mentioned, single or double button activation. There is a back tamper, which makes them eligible for a UL listing, which we do have. We have a couple other versions of these pendants that are multiple condition that, again, will work with the Vista interface and our MR add-on receivers. There's a 2 condition, a 3 condition, and even a 4 button. So if you have an application like that where maybe you press either button by itself and you get one zone, which could be a suspicion alarm, and then you press them both at the same time for a more active holdup. So talk to your account rep for going over those kinds of applications. Our bill trap is great for cash handling. It is the size of US and Canadian currency. And that would go, for example, in the 100 slot of a cash drawer. Now, this is a duress alarm by definition. What I mean by that is it's a discretely activated panic alarm. So we call that duress. And there's a jumper inside where you can set it. So when you pull the bill out, look at the flap on that bill trap. That picture on the upper left, you put the bottom bill, you tuck it under that flap, then you put all the rest of the hundreds on top of it. So if a clerk or teller is held up, they pull all the bills, and that will initiate an alarm after a 9 or 10 second countdown if you've got that delay. That means if that bill is pulled out by mistake, they can put it back without generating a false alarm. Now this bill trap can be programmed either as a zone on an alarm panel or into one of our add-on receivers going directly into the alarm input of a camera. Okay, so that is a great way to log a video of a duress alarm event in progress, hence the picture you see on the right. Then we have our glass break. Many of you have probably seen this glass break before. It's Interlogics, or UTC, I should say, with our transmitter built in. It's a decent glass break sensor that will detect the acoustics or frequencies associated with breaking frame glass. Distance is about 20 feet. This will be changing soon, as I believe this may be phased out. I believe we've got a last time buy, so there shouldn't be any interruption in availability of a glass break when we switch over to whatever our new glass break sensor will eventually be. A couple others. We do have a smoke. It is UL Resi, residential, not commercial. It's also CSFM, California State Fire Marshal, meaning if it's good enough for California, it's good enough for the rest of North America. You would probably only use these in the instance if the AHJ says, okay, if you're doing this in condos, we'll call it residential. I've seen that once or twice, but for the most part, you would not use this. But we do have EN1245, that's our carbon monoxide. It's for hospitality. It is a commercial grade sensor. UL 2075 is a system listing, which means it can participate, for example, with an appropriately listed alarm panel so that when it is tripped in the presence of excessive CO levels, it can alert people to get out as well as initiate air movement. That's a 10-year sensor. So that's our system sensor CO with Inovonics built in, EN1245. Got a couple of more here. EN1751 is our water detector. So when you're walking a site, ask if you can talk to a facilities manager and say, what are your pain points? What are you inspecting daily, weekly, monthly? Chances are you can find a sensor, whether it's maybe it's an output of a piece of industrial equipment you can put our universal transmitter on, or if there's a concern of standing water, which can cause damage like we're seeing in this picture, you would take this Honeywell FP280 probe. There's also a flare version of the probe, so that and that probe gets mounted on the floor, so that when there's, in the case of this Honeywell probe, it will trip at 1/4 inch of standing water. Flare wanted to one up that, so theirs trips at 3/16 of an inch. Both of those part numbers for that external probe are on our product guide. So that is our water leak detector, which can really take what would have been a reactive cleanup into a proactive and preventative alarm. We also have the EN1752. That's our wireless temperature alarm, which would provide an alarm signal as a zone on an alarm panel, for example, if a set point is reached, high or low. The defaults are 40 Fahrenheit for the low, 80 for the high. So right out of the box, you could put it on a wall in an IT room. And then if it gets too hot, that can send the alarm. Also good for cold storage. Then you can also go to our website, download our program for that transmitter, which uses a USB cable, goes into your PC, and then connects onto a 3-pin header on the transmitter, so that you can change those high and low set points. You can also choose if you want to use the onboard thermistor, which is the temperature sensor, or use this pictured coil here. That's a Honeywell T280R temperature sensor, which you can put into an environment that you want to sense temperature, for example, inside a freezer or a refrigerator case in a grocery store, or in, for example, in a medicine refrigerator in a hospital. So, wireless temperature alarms. Optex iSeries. So remember when I mentioned our motions and I said we bring in those sensors, we build our transmitter into it, and those have Inovonics EN part numbers. For outdoors, cold temperatures, or specialty or harsh environments, we send an Inovonics transmitter has EN 1941. We send those by the bucket full to Optex, and they build them into what they call iSeries. Now they're battery powered, good for a lot of different applications. Reach out to your Inovonics rep. I'm going to give you some information on each of them at the end of this as well, and we'll get you that full iSeries book. The units you're looking here on the left, those are some older ones. Optex has a bunch of new ones that look really, really slick, and I'll even say they look stylish. They've got different coverage patterns and mounting heights. There are PIRs for low or high mounting heights. And so that would be for volumetric detection. There's one that sits on a fence and looks 40 feet left and 40 feet right. But again, we can get you that iSeries book that shows you all those patterns. There's a quad element one, which again must see motion left, right, and up, down. That's for nuisance alarm discrimination. There's a dual tech, very excellent, because that's a true dual tech PIR microwave. So when you're in an opportunity where there's a concern of nuisance alarms, you've got a dual tech that's fully battery powered. Also, on Inovonics Weekly Cup on the 16th, we're going to have a session dedicated specifically to Optex iSeries. So stay tuned for that. They also have the beams, active IR as opposed to passive, PE beams or photoelectric. This is line detection. They come in 3 versions, the 100s, the 200s, and the 350s, which means how far apart those units go outside to establish that line detection. They can see further, up to twice as far if they're mounted indoors. So think about a set of beams shooting down a long row of dock doors at a food distribution warehouse. So it's a great way to monitor intrusion through any one of those doors with just one set of sensors. So that's the Optex iSeries. Another application would be going out in the other direction. You can take a universal transmitter, put that on an alarm panel's auxiliary output. So when the panel goes into alarm, that transmitter is activated, and you can program that into one of our 4-channel add-on receiver, and that relay can complete a low voltage power loop to any kind of an annunciator, whether it's a strobe or a siren or a light or whatever. So this would be for a remote annunciation and a guard check, for example. That would be in addition to the panel's existing siren capability. And you can also do this where that transmitter on the panel's aux output can report to multiple receivers. So you could have a multiple, even a silent, discrete indication of an alarm situation in progress at any kind of commercial entity, such as classrooms in a school. Okay, commercial fire. I fully realize, and I believe this is still correct, you're not allowed to do wireless for commercial fire as a system. Now, this is a single point add-on, so you would still need to get this granted as an exception, but this is how these things start and perhaps eventually gain acceptance. This is UL864 for commercial fire. So the transmitter would go on a switch, and then the receiver goes at the fire panel. So let's talk about this briefly. So let's say you've got a PIV, a post indicator valve, whether it's across the building, across the parking lot, or across the street. And there's no wire going to it from the panel, but it needs to be monitored. So our transmitter would take that contact, and then when that valve or switch activates, it reports to the receiver, which would be connected. Now there's 5 relays: alarm, tamper, battery, missing, and jam, that would go into the fire alarm control panel. This is UL864, which means a couple things. You do have to hook up all those relays. We need to keep the frequencies as quiet as possible so we can meet that 200-second supervision requirement. That's why right now there's no repeater for this. There eventually will be. We do have an EH repeater. We just have to run it through UL864, but we haven't seen a need for one yet. So a couple applications for this. One instance I heard of is there is a wire coming up out of a pipe out of the ground going into that PIV across the street. Fire marshal said, you can't have that pipe sticking out. It's a tripping hazard. So the integrator had to get rid of the pipe, and in so doing, the wire was compromised, and getting it back the rest of the way would have been very expensive. So this is the solution for that. Another application which could save a lot of money is, let's say there's a monitored commercial fire system in a main building, and then a new building is put up where there's a separate outbuilding on that commercial site. It's a separate building, and there's a monitored fire system, or there's a fire system, but it has to be monitored, but there's no wiring for the signaling or the monitoring infrastructure. What you can do is take this EH1115 EOL transmitter and put it on that remote building's fire panel alarm output. And that would report to this receiver in the main building's fire alarm panel. So if there's a fire in the remote building, that would report to a zone on the main building's panel, and that is acceptable from a UL864 standpoint. You would have to duplicate that with the second transmitter and second receiver for the remote building's fault output. So that would take up 10 zones. Now, I know that sounds like a long way to go, but it beats, $10,000 minimum for that kind of a trenching project. So consider that if you have this kind of situation for commercial fire. Let's see who's the first who can get that granted as an exception. Okay, we have the survey kit. Many of the branches have one. If you don't have one, reach out to your account rep and we can get you one. This is the new version. It works with an app on your phone, and this is how we do wireless range testing, which will take the guesswork out of how many repeaters you need and where do they go. So you can download our app, whether you're Android or iOS or Apple, and your phone would be the signal strength indicator connecting via Bluetooth to the receiver that's hanging on your belt, or you can just carry it on a shoulder strap or what have you. Slip it in your pocket. This is very inexpensive, but like I said, we'd be happy to get you one if you think it will help you win more jobs. The part number is EN7017, and here's how it works. What you do is we survey in the reverse direction, because radio signals are going to move or propagate from point A to point B with basically the same results as they would from B to point A. So going backwards makes it easy for one person to do a site survey all by herself. So you take the survey kit transmitter, you turn it on, and it's going to start chirping out a heartbeat, which is your Inovonics signal. Then you walk around with your survey kit to wherever there's going to be a transmitter and make sure you get a strong signal. And you can see from our hand model there, that's Scott Fincher, our product manager, by the way. When the signal gets down into the red, now you know to start looking for where to put a repeater. And like I said, the repeater needs line power, so look for a utility closet or an IDF or an MDF where the repeater can be easily powered and installed out of the way. Then what you would do is move the transmitter to that location, which is where the repeater will go. Then you repeat that process. You keep walking. Now you're determining where transmitters can go that would be relayed in by the repeater to the main receiver. You can see there is some overlap there. So if the transmitter is heard by the receiver and the repeater redundantly, nothing to worry about. We resolve that automatically. We call that redundant message handling. Nothing for you to worry about. So a little bit of overlap is good. Then you would repeat that process, building a chain link by link until you've covered the entire site. A number of you also have our EN7016 survey kit. That's available in separate parts now because we don't have the case anymore. So it's a EN4016 and an EN1210SK, and that can handle multiple transmitters at the same time for much larger site surveys. So again, get with your account rep for details on that. To summarize, again, we are known for long range and superior reliability of our wireless in the security industry. This next one, labor savings, not just cost, but time. This one has never been more relevant because, as I've said, our access to job sites is going to be limited. So whenever we can get in and get out as quickly as possible, I think that's going to be a compelling benefit and part of a good value proposition to our commercial end user customers. And think about those pictures of trenching and the overhead wiring that I showed you. This really eliminates those types of situations. Again, what really sets Inovonics apart from other wireless is we go into any kind of security platform, and that gives you the flexibility to meet the goals of the overall physical security plan that you may be working with your customer. And also think about adding panics or duress alarm capability to round out every physical security design, because that has relevance in any physical security system. And as you're looking through this list of application ideas, think about your, Nikki, I'm getting a little bit of a echo there. What's going on?
I do hear that. It's a little funny. I'm going to go ahead and mute.
Okay. And it's gone good. Okay. Think about your sensing strategy and trade-offs between sooner detection and nuisance alarm rates. So let's skip down to the bottom, the third from the bottom, copper theft. This is an application that we see a lot of. So someone's going to go up to a roof and do tens of thousands of dollars of damage to a rooftop HVAC unit so they can get maybe $50 worth of recyclable material. So a couple ways you could tackle that application. You could set up a perimeter with motions, which would detect sooner, but could open you up to sources of nuisance alarms. or you can get a specific contact set, and there are some that are designed specifically for HVAC units. So you might not detect as soon, but you're drastically reducing those opportunities for nuisance alarms to occur. So think about those types of trade-offs. And again, we always love to discuss those applications with you to help you arrive at the best overall choice. Now, here is a list of your Inovonics field contacts. I can tell you we are itching to get back out in the field, as I'm sure you are too. Now, I believe we will be driving before we're flying, but one of the best things we can do is get with you in the field and help you conduct a site survey. And that can really streamline your bid. And from there, the idea is that your value proposition will win. So reach out to us and we will do what we can to work with you remotely for now. And then we will be transitioning to getting back out in the field with you, probably driving first. So in the Southeast, we have Rita Sromick. She lives in South Carolina. She can drive to the Carolinas, Northern Florida, Georgia, which would be Atlanta, parts of Alabama and Tennessee. I've included email addresses. Our format, there's a few different ways to get us. First name dot last name, and I've put first initial last name here. So there's Rita. Chris Allen, he is a road warrior. He lives in Baltimore. He drives all over his territory in the Northeast. Bill Walker, the new guy in Chicago. He can get to Northern Indiana, all over Illinois, and up to Wisconsin. Bob Mendenhall, the other new guy. These guys are new to Inovonics, but not new to the industry. In fact, they've both been with Johnson Controls. Some of you may even know them. He lives in Houston, so he can drive around those areas. I live in Boulder, Colorado. Y'all know who I am by now, hopefully. And Dave LaPuma lives in Northern California, so he can catch the Bay Area and those surrounding areas as well. So that is the slide deck. How are we doing on time? Oh, look at us. So let's try not to crash our platform here. No, we don't want to do that. We want to go back here. And let's see, we want to get rid of that.
I'm seeing the same slide there with the field.
There we are. And are we back?
I'm still seeing that Inovonics field contact slide, and it's not in presentation mode yet.
I think we might need to stay like this because
I think that's a good call. No worries.
That if I step out,
You're
it's going to crash.
So presentation, and we've got plenty of questions for you. Did you have anything you wanted to share before we kind of dove into that?
Hey, I'm back.
Awesome. All right. Okay, I've got questions in our chat tabs and our question tab. So I'll start with the question tab. All right. First question for you. Is Inovonics still compatible with Software House?
So the answer is yes, one way or another. We were originally going into Software House for a massive project with thousands of transmitters used by the Capitol Hill Police in Washington, D.C. That interface was created by an old Johnson Controls guy who has now started his own company called New Market Solutions. And they have updated that interface. It worked with our older technology. Now it works with our EchoStream. The only caveat is it's pretty expensive, so that's going to make sense for large transmitter count systems where there's hundreds of transmitters.
Okay.
For most systems, the best way to go into Software House would be to use our add-on receiver with EN4232MR going into an iStar panel, which is a Software House piece of hardware that would allow zone inputs on that network.
Okay, great. And I think you already answered this one, Sandy. Just asking if you're going to be sending out the deck after this event. I can certainly include that in our follow-up email if that's all right with you.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll shrink it down into a PDF version and we can get that out. Sure.
Okay, perfect. No problem.
Happy to.
Next question. How do I find wireless beams in Compass?
You look them up under Optex. That's the key, because although they have the Inovonics transmitter built in, they are Optex parts. A number of them are Encompass. I believe it's the ones that are UL listed, but you can see all of the ones that exist. They do have an I on the end of the part number, which means it's iSeries for Inovonics. But yeah, that's the key. Look under Optex.
Okay, great. Another question here is, I forgot to ask if we have sales support contacts for JCI and COE.
National Center of Excellence?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what's the question. Do we have those?
You know, it's Latonia, and she's asking. I forgot to ask if we have sales support contacts for JCI and COE.
Okay, the answer is yes, and it's the same as our territory people.
Okay.
But absolutely, we're happy to work with you.
Okay, great. And then let me see.
Oh, now maybe you're asking if there's one national accounts contact. We all kind of share that role. So wherever you're listed, reach out to whoever's in your area. I think there's one in Colorado, so that would be me. Okay. But the answer is yes.
Great. She's chatting with me, so she says thank you, and that's correct. That was her question, so thank you. Okay. Let's see. From Stephen Tully, I have a question. I was hoping that there would be an option for multiple FA transmitters and receiver set that are UL 864 fire listed that can be used for places like a pump house needing multiple points that need to work with a third-party panel.
The answer is yes. Right now, it's a one-to-one. I really hope we will be expanding that capability. Again, it's all about the 200-second supervision. So stay tuned for how we will expand that. But for now, one transmitter to one receiver, and it is UL 864. So yes.
Okay, great. And it looks like you already answered his other question. Since some of these have Interlogix pieces, will there be new models soon?
The only Interlogix sensor we use is the glass break. So yeah, that is on the board there. And the smoke is system sensor, or the CO is system sensor, I should say. So yeah, we won't leave you high and dry with that. Of course, we don't go into the receiver that goes into the networks platform, the NX8. That's gone away because those panels are gone. Okay.
Okay, great. A question from Tom. How do I accomplish an upgrade from a focus panel to a new Vista panel?
You would remove the EN7285, put in an EN7290. You would have to go around and register the transmitters into the new receiver. That's very fast and easy. And then you would program up that Vista panel. That's also called Focus Forward. And you can, again, you can do that by typing in the IDs into the keypad or activating the transmitter or use the Vista software. So that's also known as Focus Forward. Anything else?
Oops. Sorry, give me 1 second.
I think you're putting me on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I was having some internet issues. That's great. Okay. And then I think you might have just had one last question. That's great. Perfect. Well, thank you, Sandy. That was great. If you're okay with it, I was going to go ahead and announce our winners for the gift cards from this presentation.
Perfect. That's going to be exactly 1 hour, so good for us.
Oh, good, good. Yes. And now hopefully some reward for staying on and everything. All right, guys. So I do this kind of the old-fashioned way. I put your names in here. And then I actually pull them out. And our 3 winners today are Wayne Wise, Scott Duffy, and Jordan Rose. So congrats. And I will actually send you an email after this event and send you your digital gift cards to use. And then lastly, just before we wrap, I know Sandy brought it up earlier in the presentation, but next week, Sandy will be co-presenting with Genetech. And I was going to go ahead and just send you a quick little invitation here. If you'd like to register, it's for our Inovonics Weekly Cup. Let me see, click here, perfect. And we also give out some prizes for registration and all that. Oops, let me see if I can get that. Hang in there with me. All right, here it is. Oh, I thought I sent it. There you go. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So if you, you see it. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, if you guys do want to join us next Tuesday at 9:30, we're hosting the Inovonics Weekly Cup. We do it every Tuesday at 9:30. They're very brief presentations often, but great information. And we've got some great partners who are going to be hosting and co-hosting with us. But Sandy, that's all I have from me. I've got the winners and that next event, but I don't see any more questions coming in.
All right.
Do you have any other closing words?
Thank you for attending today, and we'll see you out in the field.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.